Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
All right, welcome back to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. It is the midway point of your work week, almost time for the weekend. Pelicans taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder last night. Unfortunately, despite a really solid effort to get back in the game that you were down 20, taking the lead late, Pels could not come up with the victory. After the game, head coach Willie Green had this to say.
They executed better than us the last 2.5 minutes of the game. Like you said, offensive rebound. Offensively, we couldn't get anything going to the basket or get a quality look. Miscommunication on us defensively. They get a couple open threes. So, give them credit. They executed late game better than we did, but our guys battled. And they know that sense of urgency has to be there from the start. And when it is for closer to 48 minutes, those are games that we normally win. And we probably played about, 2.5 quarters of really good basketball.
As for Zion's thoughts, who had 29 points in the game?
We definitely could have managed the clock better and had some more movement. We were kind of stagnant, and I definitely got to demand the ball more in those situations.
C.J. McCollum finished with 23 points. He had this to say as to why the team couldn't execute late.
We got to execute a little bit better. We got a couple good actions. They tried to deny Z a lot down the stretch, so we got to figure out a better way to utilize him. I think Herb got a 3. I missed a pull-up, transition 3. A couple other possessions, but I think it was the defensive end. There was a possession where it looked like he carried, he drove, he kicked it. They hit a 3. I think Dort hit a 3. Another possession, I think Shea hit a 3. Shea tips an offensive rebound to somebody, they laid up. So I think those are the kind of possessions we got to try to prevent, from happening. But all in all, I thought we fought. It's hard to win the game when you get down 20. We still had a chance to win the game down the stretch. We just got to be a little bit better, and we got to be better defensively, because if you have a lead and you don't score and you get stops, you still win the game. So we got to be a little bit better on that end too.
We'll get Antonio Daniels' version as to what he saw at the end of the game here, as well, as he is our special guest coming up as he takes a look at the final 10 games of the regular season as well. But we bring in Jim Eichenhofer, NewOrleansPelicans.com. Jim, tough game to lose there, but I think you saw one of the reasons, if not several, why the Oklahoma City Thunder are a team that's battling for the top spot in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I continue to be impressed by them, especially in the 2 games that they played here against the Pelicans. You just see that the level that you're going to need to get to beat them is very high. That bodes extremely well for them in the playoffs. I know a lot of people have talked about how they don't have a lot of experience. One of their best players, obviously, is a rookie. And they have a few other guys that haven't really been to the playoffs at all, including Zion Williamson, who's probably their third best player, or their third option. But, when you're as good as SGA is and as good as Holmgren is and some of the other guys that they have, I don't know if it necessarily matters a ton that you don't have a lot of experience. They're just really good. There's a bunch of times defensively where the Pelicans had a very good possession and somebody for the Thunder would just make a great shot. Isaiah Joe had a couple where he just shot over somebody in someone's face from deep and made it. So, when you have that kind of shot making and some of the pivoting and spin moves that SGA has in the paint where, you're playing good defense on him and he still scores, it just shows you that team, they've already won 50 games. They're legitimately one of the best teams in the league, despite having a lot of young guys who haven't played a long time in the NBA.
Yeah, it's tough when you look at it like that. The thing is, you have to move on and take it as a learning experience to one extent. I know fans don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. You don't want to see it, but there's only one thing you can do is learn from that and try to execute. For the most part, you've been looking at numbers and stats and analytics. They haven't been, as of late, that bad in clutch situations. There's the fact they really haven't been, because you brought this up. Most of their games are either double-digit wins or double-digit losses. There just haven't been any situations.
It's funny, too, kind of ironic that, I mentioned the stat that the Pelicans haven't played in a game since the All-Star break that's been a final score of less than 7 or 8 points. And even though yesterday was really tight, they still ended up losing by 7. So, yeah, they've had so few close games, so few clutch time games that they haven't really been tested in that situation for you to be able to judge, like, okay, we know they struggled early in the season. Have they made improvements? We don't know because we haven't seen it. But unfortunately, last night, it was a tie game or within a possession with 3-4 minutes left. And then unfortunately, again, the opposing team made more big plays at the end. I thought one of the things that was very costly too, that was something that I thought was a key going into the game, was Pelicans are a lot better rebounding team than Oklahoma City, but over the course of the season. But last night, the Thunder won the rebounding 45-37. And I think more to the point, they had several offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter. They had one in particular that was probably the biggest play of the game, where I think SGA grabbed the ball off the right in the paint over somebody, and they kicked it out for a three-pointer. That was one of the biggest shots of the game. So I was surprised that the Pelicans were out-rebounded by OKC, but it was just even more costly of the timing of some of the boards that they gave up.
All right, let's go and get a lesson in basketball. Is how I like to look at it, as Antonio Daniels now joins us. All right, always a pleasure, and it's time to go to school, Mr. Jim Eichenhofer, as we welcome in Antonio Daniels, color analyst for Bally Sports New Orleans, and, of course, New Orleans Pelicans television. Sir, always a pleasure to have you on. This is when I need you the most. Tough loss. Great game, though. Yeah. Playoff feel. You got a sense of what I think is coming in a couple of weeks. 3-something and some change to go. Pels have the lead. They don't score again. AD, what happened for fans to be able to understand what OKC sort of did or the Pels didn't do? And more importantly, when they go to practice today, what's the staff and the players looking at to correct it? Because we're going to see this.
So here's the thing. And I've said all year, as much as I love the way this team looks, as much as I love the way this team plays, the desire, passion, perseverance that they play with, the one Achilles heel for me, the one Achilles heel for this team is the last 3 minutes of a game. Execution. That's the one thing with this team that has become problematic throughout the course of this season. I do not worry about minute 1 through minute 45. But when you start talking about more minute 46, 47, and 48, the lack of execution has been glaring. Last night was one of those times, because I feel like in the last 3 minutes of a game, you have to be deliberate and intentional on where you want that ball to go, who you're playing through, and how to get it there. And the Pelicans have yet to figure that piece out. Because if you look at a lot of these wins, they're 10 points, 15 points, 20 points. So you don't have to worry about late game execution. To me, yesterday was a loss, but it's a win because you learn in a sense, right? I will take the W's all day. You stack as many wins as you possibly can. But there's also lessons in losing, a lot of lessons in losing. And one of the lessons that this team has to learn, especially when you start talking about playing in the postseason in the second week of April, is how to execute in the final 3 minutes of the game.
AD, I wanted to kind of go with a wider lens on a couple different things that when we have you, obviously last night was a tough loss, but I mean, we're talking about a team that is in 5th place right now in the West and briefly was in 4th place for about 24 hours there. How do you, from a big picture standpoint, how do you see just the progress that they've made so far this season and where they are now with 10 games left in the regular season?
I think the big thing is you realize prior to last night's game, you were 17 games above 500. 17 games above 500. CJ's missed a good amount of time. Larry's missed a good amount of time. BI's missed time. Zion was missing time earlier in the year. Jose's missed time. Trey Murphy's missed time. You have so many different guys. Dyson Daniels missed time. You have so many different guys that have gone down throughout the course of the season. And I say this all the time. I don't think Willie Green gets enough credit. I don't think he gets enough credit for some of the things that he's been able to band-aid and get this team up to as high as the 4th spot in the Western Conference. The West is deep. The West is deep. And I can tell you what, the team that we saw earlier in the year is not the same team that you're seeing now. It's not. And it's always different to have these conversations, especially after a loss, right? Because your perspective is different. Now you're questioning everything as a fan. Well, why didn't they fill in the blank? What he should have done was fill in the blank. And for me, it's not simply about this game. It's about the bigger picture. And when you look at some of the different things that have transpired throughout the course of this season, for this team to be sitting where they are right now, right, with BI being out for the next couple of weeks or so. And like you said, Jim, being in fourth place, this team is growing. It is growing. And every time I say, you have to be patient with the process, I'm being told, you know what, Antonio, you're making excuses. No, I'm not making excuses. I'm talking about what I see. When you talk about putting the same 5 guys on the floor for a consistent amount of time, with this team, the firepower, the star power, the potential of physicality, and the versatility, now you're seeing what this team is capable of.
We've talked a lot lately on this show about, the Western Conference race. I was wondering, obviously it's really tight right now and there's a lot of things that could change. How do you prioritize in your mind the importance of maybe trying to get the 4 seed or compared to or with finishing in the top 6? How do you see that as far as what you think is most important for the Pelicans?
Well, I mean, you prioritize winning this time of the year. You prioritize winning. Me and Joel have talked about this numerous times. There's been some games this year that have been bad games, but the Pelicans have won. So you prioritize winning. If you take care of your business, you don't have to worry about what's behind you. The top 6 obviously is incredibly important because it keeps you out of the play-in, but you can get the 4. It's incredibly important for a completely different reason. Obviously, you're out the play-in, but it's a drastic difference between starting the playoffs on the road and starting in the Smoothie King Center. But if by some chance you do happen to start on the road, again, you talk about the bigger picture. Look at what this team has done on the road throughout the course of this season. This is a very good road basketball team. Obviously, road players play better at home. You would love to start at home. You would love a top 4. But if by some chance you happen to start on the road, the confidence that you have built throughout the course of this season and going into some different environments and winning will pay dividends in the postseason.
With 10 games left in the season, Zion has had such a really, excellent year, and it's been great to see him on the court so consistently after, that's been something that he's been dealing with the last couple of years. I was wondering, just from your perspective, I mean, how satisfying or gratifying has it been to see him play the way that he has and just to see the development that he's made as a player this year?
For me, I love it. Right now, Jim, Gus, he's played 61 games. 61 games with 10 games left. That's saying a lot. And I think the words that you use, Jim, as far as looking at the bigger picture, I think is incredibly important. Because remember earlier in the year where Zion wasn't playing back-to-backs and a couple games here he missed and everybody's like, you know what are you doing? Like, why aren't you just putting him out there? And they have a plan in place. They have a plan in place. And the plan in place is right now, he's on pace to play 71 games? No more back-to-backs, I don't believe.
Right.
No more back-to-back. So he's on pace to play 71 games. And if you look, that's the bigger picture. That's the bigger picture. What I love that they're doing with him now is they're moving him all around, right? He may start out the game with the ball in his hands and point Zion, so to speak. Yesterday against the OKC Thunder, he had, 6 assists, 7 assists in the first half?
Yeah.
His ability to make plays off the dribble, but then they're making him the screener sometimes. Then they're putting him in the Draymond Green role where he's catching the ball out of the pick and roll, put him in a position to make decisions. They're isolating him in the middle of the floor, which is the hardest to double team a player from. So what I love is the fact that they're moving him all around. His free throw percentage, right? He's getting to the line more, and he's also knocking down his free throws at a higher efficiency rate. So it's a lot. He's bought in on the defensive side of the ball. sitting down, moving his feet, and defending. And when you're getting this from that guy, in quotation marks, when you're getting this from that guy, it's contagious. It's contagious. The plays that he's making on the road, to watch and hear the electricity in the arena when he is doing some of the things that he's doing. Must see TV.
One of the other aspects too, and you just brought up a lot of the stuff you're seeing on the court here as well too. A lot of that you touch on the broadcast. I bring this up a lot as well. Like in the NBA, it's steps, man, and there's steps to greatness. There's steps to understanding that. I love just hearing after the game last night, hey, I have to demand the ball better. I love hearing throughout the last couple of weeks. I'm having fun. I love the last thing he talked about last night was, this is what you play for. He wants that competition. And AD, you know this. We have seen guys at that star level or guys that have tried to win championships. Maybe the moment's too big. I love, if I'm a Pels fan, hearing and seeing in its infancy right now, this guy wants these moments. He craves these moments. It actually makes him happy. And now it's just about learning how to play in those moments and taking those steps. But I love hearing that, right? Because you can't teach that, can you, AD?
See, for me, Gus, like, and I say this all the time, growth is not linear. It's not linear. You can't expedite the process of experience. You can't expedite the process of growth. You actually have to go through it. You have to. Guys have to go through it. Zion has to go through it. BI has to go through it. The team collectively has to go through it. The only way to get playoff experience is to actually get to the playoffs.
Right.
There's no other way. There is no other way. We can sit here and talk about it and so on and so forth. The light comes on for different guys at different points throughout the course of their career. Sometimes everybody can't come into this league and kind of hit the ground running like LeBron James did. And I'm not talking about in between the four lines. I'm talking about outside the four lines too. When I say understanding, I'm talking about all encompassing, understanding everything that the NBA is all about, right? From the media side to the conditioning side to the, okay, how do I balance this with my family? It's a lot that comes into this, and some guys pick it up quicker than other guys. That's the brutal reality of it. But the thing that you just discussed, Gus, is when that light starts to come on, it's visible and you can see it. You can see it. And you called it the infancy stage. The infancy stage means it's just starting.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about these young men, we have to realize that we're not discussing finished products. We are talking about products that are continuing to progress and continuing to grow.
Going back to last night's game briefly, AD, one of the things I wanted to ask you about too, as a former player, we always hear the discussion about when a team plays a home game after a long road trip, that, you know, how that affects them, and, you know, how sometimes teams come out and they don't play well. I mean, obviously by the end of the game last night, the Pelicans were in good position to win the game, but they did start off kind of slowly. One of the stats that I looked up is they're now 6-4 in the first home game after they've played a road trip of 2 or more games. So that's one little fact about this season. But I mean, as a former player, how much stock do you put into that as far as how much that affects teams and what we see on the court?
You know what, Jim, me and Graf kind of laugh about this all the time because there is so much truth to that, but yet I can't explain it.
Yeah,
there is. I'm telling you, from a player perspective, I've experienced it, gone through it, and I can't explain why. You can go back and look at different games throughout the course of this season. As Todd Graffinini, when the Pelicans played the Clippers in LA, right? When they played the Clippers in LA this last time, the Clippers had just finished a 6-game road trip. And I told Graf at that time, this is good. This is good. And the Clippers went 5-1 on that road trip. So they played extremely well. But coming back home after a road trip, that first game, you were always susceptible, always susceptible. The thing is, you know how you hear Adam Silver say, you know what, there's no data to back up load management. There's no data to back up what I'm saying. I just know it's true. I just know it's true. I did it. I felt it as a player. And now as an analyst, watching not just Pelicans games, but games every night on League Pass throughout, you are always looking at someone else's schedule to see if you can catch a team on that particular night.
No doubt. My final thing for you, sir, is obviously tomorrow it's the Bucks. You got Boston on Saturday. Milwaukee's coming off a double overtime game as a former player. Do those things weigh on you, especially when you have to travel and go in? Could that be a bit of an advantage? Or Gus, it's 10 games to go, man. All these games, these teams are going to be ready to play.
Right. That's how I think about it. Double overtime is double overtime. I think when you start talking about a back-to-back and a team plays a double overtime the night before, different case and scenario.
Okay.
But they have the entire day today to rest and travel like the Pels do as far as rest is concerned. No, I mean, for me, I did. It was a great game. It was a great game. You have a team that's coming in here. And for me, this time of the year where you're playing against teams that are playing for something as you are, that's where the playoff feel comes from.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. So to watch this team in the electricity in the Smoothie King Center when this team beat the Clippers. But then the next night, you play the Portland Trailblazers, where it's probably 7 or 8 guys on that roster who casual fans had no idea who they were. Now, what you have coming in here, you have a gauntlet. You have a gauntlet because I don't care how you look at it. Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs at the end of this, they're playing much better. They're playing much harder. And the fact of the matter is they have that dude. So now you have with this 6-game homestand, 6 games that should all be and have a playoff feel to them. That's awesome, especially this time of the year.
Yeah, no doubt. It should be fun. Antonio Daniels, as always, appreciated time. You and Joe Myers will have that call, of course, coming up tomorrow night against Milwaukee. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Jim, Gus, thank you guys.
Thanks, AD.
Our thanks to Antonio, as always, appreciate that. I keep saying this pretty much with all our guests, but we can do this for hours. I really honestly can. That's one of those where you just sit there like, Antonio dribbling, Antonio passing, chest pass. Like you could just ask him anything in basketball and you're going to get a lesson as to the correct way, the incorrect way, the mental approach to it. I really honestly can. Any guy that you could just be like, over here, whatever he wants, just sit down and I just want to talk basketball with him.
For sure. That's why sometimes with him, I try to ask as broad of a question as possible that he can go in any direction he wants with it, because I know he's going to have a ton of interesting things to say. And also too, like, I mean, I feel like this is the case with, I know Antonio has a Sirius XM show, but on TV, Joel and AD, because of the action and how fast the game goes, you're limited to a specific amount of time. You don't have a lot of time to expound. Sometimes you kind of have to get in and out. So I like being able to give him the floor and just say, hey, go one-on-one, man. We'll clear it out for you. You do your thing.
Western Conference Wednesday, sir. It's time to do your thing here as well. What is the team we're looking at?
So, by the way, too, the team to watch last week was the Houston Rockets. And I had said last week, 7 days ago, if they can win all 3 of their games, what kind of conversation are we going to have about the Western Conference play-in race? And they actually did follow through with getting all 3 wins. So now they're 1 game behind Golden State. They actually play them next week. So, man, that could be a game that you circle on your calendar as such a fun matchup where both teams will have so much at stake. Fast forwarding to this week in the next 7 days, I think when I went through a few different options, it was really almost a no-brainer to pick the Dallas Mavericks as the team to watch for various reasons. One, they have won a bunch of games lately. I think they've won 9 out of their last 10. They're 43-29 now, so as hot as the Pelicans have been over a stretch, Dallas has been equally so, and the Mavericks are now only 1 game behind the Pelicans, so that's one reason on the list. But another is really every game the Mavericks play over the next 7 days is not only super important for them and the other teams in the race, but they're playing all teams that also have a lot at stake. So they won in a blowout against Sacramento on Tuesday night. They actually play them again Friday in the second game of a baseball series, so that's crucial for them. Sunday, the Mavericks are playing at Houston, and Tuesday they're playing at Golden State. So they're playing the 2 teams that right now are in 10th and 11th place. So, I mean, not only are the Mavericks going to have a lot to say as far as who finishes in the top 6 and who doesn't, but they're also going to be a big part of setting up that Warriors-Rockets matchup that I mentioned next week. I mean, it could be a monumental showdown between those two teams, or it could be if Golden State's able to create a little bit of a gap, maybe there's not as much pressure on them going into that game. So the Mavericks are the team to watch. And by the way, too, a few people have asked about this lately and mentioned it. So obviously the tiebreaker stuff gets more and more important as we get towards the end of the season, especially when a team is only one game behind you. So the tiebreaker between the Mavericks and the Pelicans is super close. They split the season series 2-2, and then it goes to division record. The Mavericks are 9-5 in the division. The Pelicans are 9-6, and the Pelicans only have one game left in the division, and that's the home game at the end of this homestand against the Spurs. The Mavericks actually have 2 games left against the Rockets. So not only in my spiel about team to watch Mavericks is that their game Sunday against Houston is important for both teams, but it also is important because that's a division game. And so for example, if the Mavericks lose that game, they'll be 9-6 in the division, and the Pelicans will also be 9-6. So talk about a tight tiebreaker. Wow. But if the Mavericks are able to beat the Rockets in the 2 games that they have left against Houston, the Mavericks will clinch the tiebreaker. And, I mean, that could come into play. I mean, based on the way that they're playing right now and, like I said, how close they are of just being one game back. So
makes a lot of sense.
I'm curious, too. I mean, there was some discussion of who Pelicans fans should root for in the Tuesday game between Dallas and Sacramento. It's interesting to look at it from the standpoint of, do you root for the teams that are in 7 and 8, just those to lose, and you're happy with the Mavericks winning? Because if your goal is to just be in the top 6, then you say, let's see Sacramento and Phoenix lose as much as they can. We're fine with top 6. But if you're worried about the Mavericks passing you, then obviously you want the Kings to win. So you could get dizzy going through all the different scenarios, but that's what makes it fun.
I suggest go find your favorite antacid, your favorite beverage. It could be, a Mountain Dew. It could be whatever it is that you need. But these final 10 games, it's going to test your nerves. It's going to test your steel. But again, I can't imagine if you're not Adam Silver, you're not loving this, especially in the Western Conference. And here's the thing. Here's the reason why I loved the idea of coming up with the play in just a couple of years ago. And, had people go, it's going to ruin it. It's already 8. It gets everybody still involved. I mean, look at the fans in Houston. They would they would have started looking at next season weeks ago. They legit have a shot to at least play. Their games matter, and they did exactly what they wanted to do. Every game until Sunday, April 14th, is going to matter. Every single one. Mission accomplished if you're the NBA.
100%. And also, I continue to love kind of the waves of other races that it's created. For example, one of the things that Zach Lowe tweeted about last night after the Lakers beat Milwaukee was keep an eye on how close the race is between Phoenix and the Lakers, because, I mean, this would have been the case in the previous format, obviously, of 8th and 9th. But, I mean, there's the carrot of if you finish 8th, you get 2 chances to win 1 game. If you finish 9th, you're immediately in a do-or-die situation. There's the race between 9th and 10th as far as if you finish 9th, you get the home game. If you finish 10th, you have to start the play-in tournament on the road. So in addition to like what you said, as far as it's brought more teams in, it's brought an 11th place team in that in the previous setup would probably be looking at vacation already and just saying like we realistically probably can't get up to 8th, so let's start thinking about next season. It's added just so many different levels of interest, and I always love this time of the season, but I feel like I love it even more these last few years now that they've had the play-in tournament, and it's almost directly because of that reason of the implementation of them putting that in.
Jim Eichenhofer for NewOrleansPelicans.com is always appreciated. Sir, will we see you on Friday? Hopefully we'll be talking about a Pelicans win and preview the Boston Celtic matchup on Saturday afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Gus.
As always, appreciate you for listening and tuning us in. We'll see you next time on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.